Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City jazz guitarist Benji Kaplan. We caught up with him in New York in mid-May 2020 during the coronavirus lockdown to talk about his life and music. This cat makes a very unique blend of music and harmonies, and he's been doing it for a long time now. He's got great stories. Please get to know him.
Thanks for taking a minute out. Where are you at in the world?
Thanks for having me. I'm in Rhinebeck, New York.
Oh, cool.
Upstate, yeah, about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes north of New York City. Well, the thing is, I was living in Brooklyn, the whole time before this coronavirus happened. And I was in Brazil and I flew back early. I was with my wife. We were doing a whole tour in Brazil, in São Paulo and some different cities. And we were going to be there for about 4 or 5 months. But we left a month early to come back, But we moved. I mean, we've progressively been moving out of New York City, but and my family lives in upstate New York, so. But I feel very lucky
totally.
To not be in the city, and I have no desire to be in the city, and more than ever, I've lived most of my life there, and now it's a lot of people are moving. I've been watching the news, and everyone's moving their mailing address to Texas or to Colorado or wherever it is, all over the country.
Again, thanks for taking a minute out, and I just want to know, what are you doing creatively to keep yourself kind of staying satiated?
In a way, it's a difficult time for everyone, and it's a major change. And for musicians and for, a lot of gigs that I was going to have had been canceled. And even some places that reached out and said, well, if you want, we can move the date maybe to September, or, even the venues themselves feeling hopeful about, the prospect of reopening their business. But, I'm planning for the worst, I'm trying to be optimistic, but basically, I'm spending my time, trying to find myself a routine, getting up early and composing and arranging and playing, doing a lot of, actually taking more time to compose new stuff, So in a way, that's good, to get the opportunity to slow things down and not have the other, have certain things leaning over my head, of, I need to do this, I need to do that. There's certain, I can kind of let myself do other things that I might not have allotted myself enough time to before, That's one positive thing. And also cooking a lot more, at home.
Yeah.
So that's also, something I was always running around and I think this time's also kind of gotten us to try to, slow ourselves down a bit, But I'm lucky to have my parents, my brother, and my my sister and my wife close. We're all close by now, which is ironically we were all there very distant before. So we were more family wise we were more isolated. Now we're more isolated from friends, right? But now I'm closer to family and more isolated from friends. So, it's it's an interesting time. Of course, I weave an additive thinking about what's going on and then trying to refocus my attention to music and things like that. But
and I guess that's the point of all of this. At the end of the day, it's all life after all. And I know that's a simple thing, but it really is. And I think that, Mother Nature wins, and it's probably, I think we're at a point now, we've been into this far enough, we have to start looking at, what are the silver linings? We can be connected, because if this was 1985, we would all be just going crazy. We'd be listening to Van Halen 1984 so much, we'd hate Van Halen.
Right.
We would just be like, what's going on? But now,
totally.
If we start losing our marbles, we can be like, all right, look, we're going to look at that So What recording that Miles Davis did with Coltrane, or we can go look at, Ornette Coleman, what he was doing. There's options.
There's options, yeah.
But
yeah, it's amazing to think about that.
Yeah, and I keep thinking about that scene from Back to the Future when they had the hazmat suit on, and he did hit Eruption from Van Halen, and he woke him up, and he was like, "I am the future." And it's like, that's where we're at right now. We're at a weird convergence of like actually being in a hazmat suit, Aldous Huxley novel, and also, we still have running water, electricity, gas. We have all these amenities. We still have, most of us have families. Like, there's all these things that we can look at and say, hey, maybe this isn't so bad, I mean.
Right. Totally.
So, but anyway.
Yeah,
so let's
sure.
Let's talk about your roots in jazz. Let's go back to the beginnings, about where you were born and raised and how jazz became your life.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was born and raised in New York City. I lived, from my early childhood, from 0 to 11 in Upper East Side. And I was exposed to a lot of music all along. My father loved all kinds of music too, so he had a collection of jazz, African music, Middle Eastern music, a lot of Jewish music. And so I started out playing when I was a little kid, like 5 years old. I was playing, hand drums and percussion, things that my father taught me and my brother and stuff to play. We'd play in drumming circles and things. And then when I was 11, I got my first guitar, and I started playing. I started getting really into it, and I Duke Ellington and was one of the first things that I fell in love with, Duke Ellington and Django Reinhardt. Because when I was 11, my mom took me to on a trip. She took me to Greece, and ironically, I discovered like Django Reinhardt in Greece in like a CD store, and it was like 1997, But and then I started going to Smalls in New York City. Like when I was 12 or 13, I would go by myself with my brother. Back then, it was like a real kind of hole in the wall, and people could bring their own beer and things, and there was no age limit, there was no time limit, it was free, and the most you would spend was $10. So I would go out and hear all the people that, in the New York City and music scene, and older people that some have passed away, some still around. A bit like, Jimmy Lovelace was a drummer. I remember seeing that guy, and he played with George Benson and all kinds of people in the 60s. And a lot of these guys that grew up during the period when bebop and was going on, and the swing era, and that idiosyncratic style. I remember the drummers, having the solos and everything like that, and just that was a really important experience for me to be able to go there many days a week. And and Mitch was Borden, who is no longer managing or I don't know if he's even running half of it anymore, but he was a real open-minded, open-hearted guy, and just hanging out in a place like that. It was different than it is now. It's still cool in the fact that it's there, but it was much more accessible for somebody like myself, who was just a little kid who wanted to get some exposure to hear things, and then start going into the jam sessions and all that, and being encouraged, So, and nowadays, I would say that I'm pretty jazz influenced, but I'm, I write a lot of my own music, and it sort of mixes a lot of elements, jazz and Brazilian and classical music, so I guess I could still consider myself a jazz musician, but in one realm or another. Yeah.
So,
and then I went. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, then when I was 18, I went to the New School, and then there I studied jazz and jazz guitar and performance as well, and that was a great experience to meet, and get to play with, but Benny Powell for one was there, teaching Buster Williams, all these like people from the 60s and 50s that were imparting their knowledge and telling stories, and then we'd play with them, and then we'd play in ensembles and things like that, and go out and at nighttime and playing jam sessions and things like that. Just it was a very amazing time. Or to hear about, you know, swing fields from Chico Hamilton, you know, and then him getting on the drums and saying, no, you know, it's like this, and or play less notes, or, you know, and talking about, you know, composing and arranging, and Charles Tolliver too was an interesting guy. He gave some really interesting ideas about assignments for arranging small group ensembles and things like that. So mixing all that stuff, the theory and the, you know, approach and technical studies of music mixed with being immersed in the city, and, you know, was definitely is an enriching experience, you know.
Well, and you've been at this for a while. What kind of magical moments have you had on stage or with other musicians that you're kind of thinking about or relying on now during this time of no live music?
I would say, I mean, more recently when I was playing with my wife in Brazil. She's a vocalist, a songwriter, and lyricist. And, you know, just sharing our music with, you know, audiences and in different venues, you know, and actually really kind of, you know, letting loose and going places musically, you know, artistically, trusting each other, and just kind of spontaneous things start to happen. But no specific moment right now that I can account, you know. But yeah. Well, what do you like the best about being a musician? It's kind of like for me, it's my greatest like spiritual practice, you know. It's like where I feel like I learn about life on a larger scale in that one place, you know. And it teaches me about, you know, it's a discipline. So the things I learn in music, you know, affect me and the rest of my life. And I guess overall, I think of it as a blessing, you know, because it brings so much joy, and you have to work hard, and you're not always, you know, gonna go. You can't always go to it and approach it feeling super excited, like, oh, I'm just gonna play now because I'm so inspired and I have so many ideas. Those moments are wonderful too, but it's also about, teaches you that, you know, you gotta show up and do, you know, put your effort in when you're not feeling inspired, and you know, continuing that practice consistently, you know, when times are good or bad. Like, you know, during this situation, I feel like I would be much worse off, you know, worrying a lot more. It's sort of an affirmation, a confirmation that, you know, we're alive and spiritual and beings and creative, and, you know, so I think that all of that is totally, you know, that's where I find magic, you know, too. I don't always know where the music comes from, you know. So sometimes you sit there and learn a piece of Debussy, and I was sitting there the other day, and like I spent all this time trying to learn Clair de Lune on the piano, but for guitar. I was arranging it, and I didn't find, and I was kind of thinking the next day, oh, I'd come up with something really cool, like my own piece, inspired by that, because that happens a lot too when I learn a song, and then that's a really magical moment for me. Is like learning a song by João Bosco or a Brazilian composer, and then all of a sudden the next day something comes out of me that seems like it might have been inspired, or it just gave me a spark of inspiration. But I just found, like, okay, so nothing happened with the Debussy. Nothing came to me. But then, you know, like a week later, I was working on a tune, like, If Ever I Should Leave You, I think is what it's called. I think it's from, like, Camelot, from a musical. And all of a sudden, in the range, it's something that I was studying in the Debussy started to kind of just come out subconsciously, an idea for creating a chord melody, you know? So I think all that stuff is, like, so amazing, you know, and sometimes it comes and sometimes it doesn't, you know? But yeah. Well, you know, we're going to get back to the live music eventually. Sure. And when we do, what do you hope both musicians and the audience realizes from this time away? Well, I hope that, for one thing, that people see how strong and resilient we are, because I know we'll come out of the situation on the other side. And when live music is abundant again, and people go out to hear people play, and people go out to play, that they'll be able to take with them lessons learned from the experience of having to be limited, by the situation, the circumstance we're in, and be able to make us stronger, so that when we have, because musicians all go through those ebb and flows too, and sometimes you have a flock of gigs or opportunities, and other times you don't, or you're looking for them and they're not coming as much. But I think and the fact that everyone's in this sort of together, it kind of, I also think it's going to make musicians think more creatively too, myself included, all of us, in how to find other ways of reaching people online. I know that it's not the ideal thing to play online concerts, and not always have a set fixed income that you can charge for it. But it's been a good opportunity to try to get more of my students in Zoom lessons, and that it's good to know that I can still reach the musicians online, and teach students, and the information we're still able to carry on our information and share with each other without meeting in person.
Hey, so my final question to you is this. Everyone has their version or their perception of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Wow. That's an interesting question. Sometimes I think I'm a fraud, No. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I'm just a person who, like everybody else, just like the same as everyone else, dealing with the same thing, the same struggles, trying to make the most out of each day and meaning. I guess I would say I'm an ordinary average Joe,
Hey, man, Benji, thank you for taking some time out to talk to Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Joe. I really appreciate it, and it's great talking to you.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Benji for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.